I call Simon O'Connor.
Mr. Speaker, there's always a paradox when we're talking about Luther and conscience and that call from the honourable member as I stand to rise here today. I think it's good to start that this is not a bill that's talking about the right to strike or the freedom of association. This is about the process of making the decision to strike. And I think that's an incredibly important distinction. And it may, and I can't think for the opposition or others, but this may help diffuse some of the tensions that are there at the moment. Because again, it's coming back to that whole principle. You have the right to strike. You can strike when circumstance allows. A person can strike. This bill, though, of the Honourable Tau Henare is looking about the process about how a person moves to make the decision to strike. So in doing so, it is with a great conscience, and I hope I sleep well tonight, that I stand in support positively. Now, it's always good to be positive, I think, particularly, absolutely, in support of this private members' bill, the Employment Relations, the Secret Ballot for Strikes Amendment Bill. And again, I just want to acknowledge Tau Henare and the work that he's done, not only to bring this to the House, but to take it through Select Committee, to take, I believe, suggestions that have come from the floor and elsewhere, and to incorporate it into the bill which we have in front of us now. I wanted to address a couple of the thoughts, questions, insights, if you will, that were being put out through this debate. One was that we don't have any problems. Why do we need this bill? You know, why put the law in place if it's already running perfectly? Well, the first reason is clarity. I've always thought that one of the great principles of democracy and of this House is to have clarity in the law. And there's no harm in taking the time, an appropriate time of this House, to clarify the law, to codify it, to give it some structure, and also to make success clear. And I acknowledge what an honourable member was noting earlier. Some major unions are conducting secret ballots, and that is an excellent thing. That is something which is to be acknowledged. But this House can be about success, celebrating it, clarifying it and codifying it into the House. And to use an analogy, if it is going well for others, well, why not? Why not draw that into legislation? Why not put that across all the unions in this case so that they can share in that success? I've heard it from some, no, there's still no need. There's still no need. You know, we have to look at it and say, well, look, analogously, you know, some people look after the environment. Some people are concerned about different aspects. So let's not do any legislation around it because, you know, some are already doing it well. That doesn't really work. It's not a logical conclusion because I find that law is often about exceptions. We put law in place to deal with exceptions. People have been talking about their backgrounds, and a small part of my recent one is around contracts. And the whole point of contracts is not to work with what's happening day by day, it's there to work with exceptions. And in some ways, this is what this law is about. It's trying to take the exceptions in the unions, where democracy is not fully expressed, and allowing it to become the norm, to follow the example of many unions, and allowing secret ballots. But also, Mr. Speaker, this law is about providing certainty. It's not trying to rely on the moral goodwill of unions or individuals, union leaders in particular, to just do the right thing. It doesn't work. Moral goodwill does not always work. Again, this is one of the points that we have this legislature, to come along and provide certainty. And I want to add too, when we got onto the aspects of morality a bit earlier from one of the speeches, we can't go about in this House constantly linking every issue to the UN, to human rights, to the change in oil prices or whatever. This is really a fairly simple debate. I also want to add that this is not about the particular strikes that we've had currently, in the past or in the future. And I say that because this is about democratic process. This bill is very simple. It's about the democratic principle to vote and to vote secretly. I think it really comes down to that. I always am a great believer in principles because what this is about is the Employment Relations Act. It's about modifying it, Mr. Speaker, to allow individuals within the unions to exercise a democratic right to vote secretly. Mr. Speaker, strikes are a serious undertaking. Strikes, yes, anything like that, lockouts, strikes, they are a serious undertaking. And I'm sure the honourable member would agree, therefore, as a consequence, that these decisions of a lockout or a strike should not be taken lightly. And in the terms of a strike, these are communal actions, Mr. Speaker. Strikes are a communal action, but each individual person is affected. And so to that end, in my thinking, it's paramount that each individual has the complete freedom to act as they see fit. And so looking at the democratic principles, a secret ballot enables that. They already, excuse me, they have the right, therefore, to exercise democratically their vote secretly. And I cannot perceive the threat, the concern, the problem with that. Because ultimately, secret ballots ensure freedom. They ensure a democracy. And look, there's plenty of analogies, and many of them have been flown across the House today and in weeks past around the secret ballot. This is not something new, Mr. Speaker. This is not new to our democracy here in New Zealand or around the world. I think actually last time that I stood to speak on this bill, I noted that the idea of secret ballots have been around since the 18th and 19th centuries. Being the type of person that I am, I decided to pick up old Hansards and records from the past and read through the debates, and it's fascinating how in some ways history repeats itself. The same arguments against secret ballots continued back then, they're continuing here today. Personally, a secret ballot empowers people. It empowers our democracy in the action of voting to bring us here to Parliament, and I cannot see any problem with exercising it in the unions because, as it's been noted many a time, it is already enacted in many unions. Let's codify it, let's simplify it, let's express it in law. And personally, here as I stand in the 21st century, I don't know why we would look backward, if you like, Mr. Speaker, and oppose this sort of democratic lineage. And I think it's great, Mr. Speaker, to be part of a parliament that's expanding and working to expand and enable this democratic process. You know, it really is a privilege to be in this parliament. It's a privilege to be in this parliament, which is helping develop the democratic process. But I thought I'd just turn very quickly to some of the other issues that were being brought up, because there's been a bit of a discussion around lockups versus strikes, board stakeholders versus unions, and I've been trying to give this some thought, but it's somewhat on the hop, so I'll have to apologise in advance if need be. But people are saying there's no symmetry here, that there's no similarity between the boards and between the unions. And what I was thinking, though, is that boards are making decisions for others. The board is making a decision for others. When workers consider a strike, they're making a decision for themselves as individuals. And I think that's an important distinction. If individuals are going to be making their decision to strike, they need those universal principles which we talk about in the UN and others, these human rights, the ability to associate freely, as the opposition agrees, but the ability to express their democratic franchise as they see fit. And in a union vote, when union members are making their vote to strike, they are making a direct and deliberate action of and for themselves. But when we look at a board, even when we look at shareholders, be it in a company, be it in a friendly society or whatever, they are not making a direct, Mr. Speaker, they are not making a direct association with themselves. It is indirect. And I think that's an important distinction and one that we do need to think about. Because at the end of the day, this bill does sit within a context of a national government committed to all New Zealanders. We're not here to make random and rash decisions on people, to fire ad hominem names around. We are here to work for all New Zealanders. We've progressed to increase the minimum wage. We've put through the 90-day bill to improve those opportunities. We've worked to enable workers to have the right to choose, secretly or otherwise, the right to choose how to use their fourth week of leave. And I think it's important to put this debate within that context. But I come back exactly to where I started from, that this really is a bill of principles. It's a principle of democracy. It's the ability as an individual to vote as you see fit, freely and secretly, and to take, Mr. Speaker, the success that the opposition has spoken of the EPMU and others, and say, hey, let's codify this into practice. Let's celebrate what is a good way of working in order that people will make their right decisions. So I'm going to stop there just before there's more interjections, because, you know, we want to get down to the real business of getting this passed. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I understand the next call is a split call. I'll ring the bell at 4 minutes, a minute to go. Phil Twyford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.